and then we're about to start in a minute. Thank you all for coming. I know it was not an easy task today to come to the UN House.
Pretty good.
Yeah, with the strike, and I heard there was some flooding throughout the city as well, so here we are. Maybe we need to start working in Brussels on risk reduction. So I'm asking Saskia to give me the cue. My colleague is sitting in Panama, so she's hosting the virtual event from there. "20 seconds, the countdown is running, so. So people are getting in. We have online around close to 130 registrations from around the world, also mainly based in the Latin America regions. Some of our donors are looking into this, so I think it's a very diverse audience. So let's see. 20 seconds is over. It's the new normal, and it's still a very uncomfortable situation, I have to admit, between online, virtual, and hybrid and in-person. So, okay, ready. Are you okay to go? Can I get started? Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, colleagues and friends, it is my great honor to welcome you to the UN House, but also online. Wouldn't it be nice to have a world without disasters that are caused by natural hazards? We are experiencing very hot summers, wildfires, floods, even today in Brussels, hurricanes, earthquakes, and the list doesn't stop here. Climate change is just at our front door. My name is Stephanie Danmanti Palma, and I'm working for the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction. UNDR's vision, my organization's vision, is a world where disasters no longer threaten the well-being of people and the future of the planet. The Latin America region is not spared from disasters, and yet many of us here in this room, but also working online, are working towards the preparedness and prevention to disasters. The European Union is an essential partner to our organization for many, many years. And after a decade of working together in Latin America and the Caribbean region, it's time to reflect on what we have achieved together. Have we actually made a difference? Today, we're looking forward to an exciting discussion over the next 2 hours, where we will be hearing about some of the impacts achieved. Before we get into this, I'm informing you on some housekeeping. If you're watching online and you wish to follow the session in Spanish language, you can select the language channel on the world icon below the Zoom video window. And if you want to pose questions to the panelists, please do so by accessing the tab called Q&A. It's on the right-hand side of the menu. Later on, we will be using slido.com, for our polls through the session. In-room participants, if you want to go on your mobile phones, you're actually allowed to do so. You can type in www.slido.com, and you can insert the code hashtag 8720730, and I hope you remembered it. If not, it will be online, don't worry. Don't worry, Your Excellencies here in this room. You will be able to ask questions equally, but we will be doing it the old-fashioned ways by raising your hands, or I'm going to look deep into your eye and exert a question from you. But enough of me. It's my pleasure now to introduce you to Ms. Camilla Bruckner, who is the director of the UN House, but also from UNDP. Camilla, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Stephanie. And welcome ambassadors, representatives, EU partners, colleagues, and UN colleagues here in the building. As Stephanie said, I'm Camilla Bruckner. I am formerly the SG's representative here towards the EU and to Belgium. and represent therefore the EU or the UN, and also head the UNDP office. And for those of you who may not have been to the UN House before, or have just arrived in Brussels, I'd just like to give you a quick introduction to who we are here in this town. We are actually a family of 27 agencies here in Brussels, with around 500 staff, all focused on the partnership with the EU, some also with the Benelux countries, and others also with the whole of Europe. So it's quite a substantial investment from the UN side, you can see, especially to our EU partner. So, the way we are working with the EU finds in many ways. Of course, there is cooperation in our partner countries. So we have colleagues all over the world who partner with the EU in a country to implement joint programs. We also have very strong regional cooperation, and then also very global cooperation that is both taken out from here in Brussels, but also, of course, in New York and other UN headquarters. And while we try to find the best modalities of working to implement the Sustainable Development Goals, the Paris Agreement, and the Sendai Framework, I would like to give you just a couple of examples where we have collective work. We try to work as one. We are many agencies that work in this field, but as I said, we try to come together to provide the best solutions and the best competencies to the table when we partner with the EU. For example, we have UNDRR and UNDP signed in 2020 a joint statement of intent to strengthen their collaboration and to enhance the impact of their action at country level. And I think Ronald Jackson from UNDP is also party to this event, which is a good illustration of that partnership. And a lot of the cooperation we have with the EU is with several agencies together at once. I would like to highlight that disaster risk reduction is a typical example of an area where different partners have to come together across the human development and peace nexus. Because while providing humanitarian preparedness, it is essential that it also connects to longer-term structural development program to enhance disaster prevention capacity at the national and local level. UNDP and UNDRR recently signed, for instance, an ambitious partnership with the EU of 18 million euros to support disaster risk governance and disaster recovery in ACP countries. I would also, in particular, like to praise the UN ECHO partnership on disaster preparedness in the Latin American and Caribbean region, emphasizing that UNDRR, but also UNDP and other agencies have significantly strengthened the relationship with ECHO's disaster preparedness team, and they're here, present, through regular engagement at the global, regional levels in the Latin American region, and through projects in many countries of the continent. Finally, I would like to emphasize the importance of risk-informed development for disaster risk reduction in the Caribbean, where there is a need to support systems capacity. Overall, it is setting the scene in the terms of the UN and EU collaboration, and we are very grateful for you to have spent your precious afternoon to celebrate this partnership across institutions and countries today. Thank you.
Thank you, Camilla. Very well received. So now, as we are in the new world, we're moving over to the hybrid part, tiny bit. We're starting Alvaro. I'm going to introduce Mr. Alvaro de Vicente. He's the head of the ECHO regional office based in Panama. Alvaro, please, over to you. Introduce to us the agenda for today and the objectives and what we're going to do. Please.
Thank you, Stephanie. Good morning from Panama to everybody. It's a pleasure to see some known faces and people with whom we have been working for years, for more 10 years and often more than 10 years. If we go back in time to 2011, at that moment, in Latin America and the Caribbean, ECHO has been working for already several years, working at local level, mainly with disaster preparedness initiatives, creating models, tools, and ideas. At the same time, we had UNDRR, that at that moment was called UNISDR, that was the regional strategy, advocating for improving the DRR and reducing the impacts of disasters in the region. At that moment, yes, the contact between UNDRR and ECHO allowed us to imagine what were the huge possibilities of working together. And since then, a beautiful story started that we are today celebrating. Okay, so today the objective would be, first of all, to showcase how the disaster preparedness that has been supported by this partnership of UNDRR and ECHO has made a difference in the region. Second, to illustrate how the tools, the models that have been produced have been influencing the public policy in the region, in the different countries. And last but not least, to analyze the lessons learned of these 10 years of working together in a way to orient and to enlighten the way forward from now on in the next years. Okay? Obviously, all of these discussions and key points are going to be passed to the regional platform that will take place in Uruguay at the end of February. Okay. Here we have participants. I think that we are lucky to have the participation that we have today with people from implementing partners, people from regional and national institutions that have been participating on all this adventure. Okay. And we have obviously people from ECHO, my colleagues that are participating in this and have been also contributing to this. To all of them, I want just to say hello and to thank for all these 10 years of work. To present the agenda, so we will start with a video of just to warm up a bit the atmosphere of the meeting. After that, there will be the opening words by ECHO and by UNDRR. But thinking that this partnership of ECHO and UNDRR goes beyond what our own organizations, there will be a discussion panel with some of the main partners that have been participating in this history. And this panel will have 4 participants, and we will have question and answers at that moment. This will be followed by a poll that was announced by Stephanie. And after that, we will be closing with you again, with INPA. Okay. So I will not extend myself anymore, and I will just give the floor to present the video. Thank you.
Thank you, Alvaro, and thank you for the video. I hope we all enjoyed it here very much. It is now my pleasure to introduce to you my colleague Raul Salazar. He's the chief of the Regional Office for the Americas and the Caribbean, based in Panama, and he came all the way to be here today with us. Raul.
Thank you very much, Stephanie, and thank you to all the colleagues from ECHO that have invited us and endured this partnership for the last 10 years. Andrea Kulaima, Director of Sub-Saharan Africa, Asia, Latin America, and the Pacific of DG ECHO. Our colleagues that are connected here, I see already many of them from the ambassadors that are present here, partners, and also the online audience, our colleagues from Preparedness in Central America, UNDP, Ecuador, and CARE International to this event. And thanks again for DG ECHO for this decade of partnerships and for the organization of this joint event. I would like probably to mention something that is what Vicente mentioned at the beginning is when we started, 2011. It was the moment I joined UNDRR, coming before, and it was actually one of the first experiences was starting building these new projects. I was in a different role than I am now, and I know how this partnership started, motivated and inspired by the needs that we were facing at that moment. In terms of the impacts of different types of disasters, and to be, since the very beginning, thinking on how we can better help countries to prepare. And before that, I was working in UNDP, and working in UNDP Peru, so I also had experience of the PECO support in Peru directly at the country level, and knew the potential of this partnership had in terms of how we can advance and then how we could better work together based on what we had achieved already. And in the Americas and the Caribbean, as you have seen already, after 14 ECHO actions, nearly 8 million directly with UNDRR, but if you multiply that by the different partners you have supported also in the different initiatives at the different levels too, because one of the things that is a characteristic of ECHO is how you have reached and established fruitful partnerships with civil society, for example, for implementing and reaching out to the communities as a very important part of a component of not only humanitarian action but also preparedness. And if we summarize what has been achieved and go by different levels from the regional levels, I would probably think that the last 10 years have been the most influential in shaping what is actually now the regional policies in terms of disaster reduction. We see the regional policies in Central America, the Central American policy for this comprehensive risk management, shaped with the support of ECHO and aligned to the Sendai Framework. We have seen Preparedness, the CDM strategy, and Ronald is here. Ronald was at that time leading the CDMA, and then he was leading also the process of the CDM, the acronym for the strategy in the Caribbean, and also aligned to the Sendai Framework, and going beyond that, going to the national levels, supported all the processes that came afterwards, from the Preparedness and then the umbrella of Preparedness and then the umbrella of the CDM, and also in sub-regional organizations like in Andean countries, how this regional support that existed through these actions allowed to develop the national plans that were actually the ones complemented with the actions for the community through civil society. The regional platform, which is one of the mechanisms that we have for building the agenda of priorities in disaster reduction, is a mechanism that we have every 2 years. We gather all, not only governments, because it's an intergovernmental mechanism, but also complemented with the participation of different organizations, intergovernmental organizations, also civil society organizations, science and technology, the UN agencies participate in this. And basically what we have in the regional platforms is the agenda of priorities that we would like, and the countries propose, we should concentrate our efforts in. Well, these regional platforms have had an important participation from different communities, representatives that have brought their voices, the voices of the ones that are sometimes lost if we do not pay attention or bring them to the forum, usually are lost if they are not supported. ECHO has been very aware of this, and every and single each regional platform has had the participation of these communities. Going into a group perspective, how we can, for example, forget that the participation of the Caribbean consistently in this platform has brought the perspective of the Caribbean, perspective of seats in every single outcome document and priority results of the regional platforms we have had. And now this is shaping the commitment also from the Caribbean in addressing these regional contexts. The last regional platform took place in Jamaica, organized by Jamaica, first time in the Caribbean. And the action plan coming from that platform addressed many of the concerns of the small island development states and small communities on those islands. I wouldn't like to go into the detail of how much we have done at the national level has already been described in terms of the plans, results that we have achieved in shifting and contributing to shift the focus of the countries from response to preventive action. And this is very clear, this shift in the conceptual approach in the Americas and the Caribbean. This is something that has been achieved with your contribution. And as I was telling Andrea before this meeting, through something that was very important and key for me, having seen these 10 years of collaboration, the consistency in being in the region, even though the region was not necessarily in the priority, in the global priority, in terms of what was perceived as needs. Differences still exist in the Americas and the Caribbean, and those gaps were addressed by the DPECO actions and influenced countries in going aligned to the Sendai Framework and also address the commitment for building resilience. And I would like to finish just mentioning that these efforts in the regions, in the Americas and the Caribbean, have definitely transcended the region, have had an impact in two ways. One, in the old experiences of what you have supported in the region, nearly 1,000 best practices systematized and put in what was at that time a benchmark. It was the first virtual platform on a website that gathered it was a collection of all these experiences accessible to not only to the region but everywhere. And as has been mentioned there, in 1 year just reached 9 million visits. So you are sharing what you achieved in the Americas and the Caribbean with the rest of the world, but also have influence in the European agenda to incorporate a prospective risk vision to avoid the generation of new risks. And this is very clear also, and we appreciate that integration of these disaster risk reduction considerations into the humanitarian aspects. And to end up, we have the question now. What now? What do we do now in the context of new context, new complexity of risks, new cascades effects of risk that we are facing today, simultaneous impacts of different type of risks, not only natural hazard but also human-induced hazards, how we are going to address this. And I think that this opens a new area of collaboration, new way of thinking together, how we're going to support countries to be up to the task of addressing these new complexities. The integration of disaster reduction and climate change action, not only in our actions on the field, but also at the institutional level, is very important for us. What we call the coherence of the agendas is quite important, and how we can reflect that integration in our actions. How we can support better not only early warning systems to the country, but multi-hazard warning systems. Try to address and capture that complexity. And also call you and invite your partners to integrate your knowledge, your experiences in the incoming regional platform 2023, that as usual will capture these recommendations in the outcome document of this platform, and that will reflect the priorities of the region. I think that we both and all the partners want and aspire for a more resilient Latin America and the Caribbean, and how we can forward the idea of that prevention save lives, and I think that we have very good examples on how to do it, and we need to continue doing it. Thank you very much for all this collaboration and trust.
Thank you, Raul, and thank you for being on time. We're doing really well so far. It is now my honor to introduce you to Miss Andrea Kulamaya. I hope I pronounced your last name. Kindly correct me, teach me. She's the director for the Sub-Saharan Africa, Asia, Latin America, and Pacific in ECHO. Andrea, please come here. We're better with the first names.
Thank you, Stefania, and thank you, Raul and Camila, for these nice introductory words. Solidarity, as you know, is the cornerstone of the European project, and the solidarity within the EU, when it comes to natural disasters, expresses itself, as we've seen this summer with all the forest fires, with what we call the European Civil Protection Mechanism, which is a mechanism that coordinates the assistance that some member states will give to other member states. And by doing that work together, we do it more efficiently and we're stronger in doing it. But this solidarity is also expressed in, that's the part of civil protection that ECHO represents. The solidarity is also reflected in the other arm of DG ECHO, which is the longest one, which is the humanitarian arm. And relief assistance in terms of our response to natural disasters, to protracted crises, to sudden conflicts, that relief assistance is matched by an investment that ECHO has done ever since it started on disaster preparedness, the so-called famous DPECO program that started in the 90s, and which has found its, I would say, most fertile ground in Latin America and the Caribbean. And I think we see a continuity of that investment. It has been 10 years with UNDRR. I would say it has been 25 up to 30 years with the region in terms of work on both arms, both the relief assistance, the sudden response, but also the response on the disaster preparedness. So DP, as we call it, disaster preparedness, is one of our main priorities in Latin America and the Caribbean. Today, close to 20% of the total budget allocated by ECHO in the region has been dedicated to disaster preparedness activities. And if you consider that the saying goes, $1, €1 invested in disaster preparedness saves 5 to 8 euros in response, you can imagine what 10-20% of our investment in disaster preparedness can mean in terms of real impact. We began funding the DP actions in South America in 95, in the Caribbean in 96, and then the big boost came in 1998 after the Hurricane Mitch in Central America. With this program, we have invested more than 321 million euros in 34 countries through more than 621 projects reaching 30 million people in the whole region. And that, as you were mentioning earlier, Raul, with the participation and the involvement of a great diversity of organizations and partners. Because of the way we operate from a legal and financial perspective, some people might think that ECHO only works with the UN and with international NGOs. But I think these programs show that actually our outreach is much longer, and that the partners of our partners are our partners. And therefore, the family of partners and organizations with whom we work is extremely diverse. And those partnerships have been very faithful and have been continuing from year to year. The program has evolved because the world has evolved, because the notion of disaster has evolved. A few years ago, or more than a decade ago, we used to only call disaster something which was natural, and then that interpretation, and I welcome that, evolved to include also not only natural hazard, but also epidemics and human-induced threats, including armed conflict and violence. And then there are other situations which you don't call hazards because they're not hazards. Situations of population movements, which again are not a hazard, but can create a number of needs to the populations themselves who are on the move, as well as those to host them, where what is done on disaster risk reduction can actually help if a volunteer group is able to respond to a disaster and know how to do it, that skill is actually replicable to how to host an influx of 1,000 migrant or 1,000 displaced in a given location. And I have been able to witness myself last year in Darien, for example, how the volunteers were able to respond to the needs of those who were arriving, and those skills were actually coming from that experience in disaster risk reduction and in responding to disasters. So you mentioned it, Raul. The big next step is going to see how we integrate that complexity of hazards in the preparedness work. So we have been supporting local communities and national authorities to set up emergency plans and early warning systems, develop information education campaigns, reinforce vital infrastructure, protect livelihoods, promote coordinations between those who are responsible for anticipating or reacting to disasters. And all these actions have had, I would say, two characteristics. One has been the participatory nature of them. We started building DPECO from the roots, not from the top. And then at some point we started doing it from the top, and the two have joined each other. And the second aspect is that the action always integrates a conflict-sensitive approach. So the policies have evolved, and the next step in that development of our policies as far as ECHO is concerned is that we have recently set up environmental standards, and those will be applied in all the actions that we fund, not only on the disaster preparedness side, but also on the response side. So disaster preparedness saves lives, and I think that is a motto that I strongly believe in. When we have had a couple of years ago ETA and IOTA, we could also see not only the devastation that they caused, but we could also see the efficiency and the effectiveness of the response by the countries and by their neighbors. And that was a result of this investment into the disaster preparedness over many years. So through our DP actions, our aim is to reduce suffering and anticipate immediate humanitarian needs. It is essential to give people the ability and the skills to prepare themselves and their communities and to anticipate these emergency humanitarian needs. As examples of these actions, we have had, for instance, the timely activation of early warning systems established by local authorities through ECHO-funded initiatives. These allowed, for instance, the evacuation of people in La Paz, Rio de Janeiro, Nevada de Lulia in Colombia, and many other places just before the floods, landslides, or volcanic eruptions hit their communities, thus saving thousands of lives. However, these success stories were localized and limited to the place where the projects are implemented. And a key challenge, which I think through our collaboration we have managed to take up, is how do you replicate, how do you disseminate, how do you turn people from learning people and learning institutions in the place where you learn to actually do that throughout the organization, throughout the communities, throughout the governments and the countries which are involved. That dissemination and that replication is essential. So in El Salvador, Venezuela, and Bolivia, national and subnational institutions adopted the early warning systems implementing through DPECO actions in vulnerable communities, and therefore by doing that they extended the impact beyond the scope of the individual projects. Another notable example is the Tsunami Early Warning System Working Group, which is integrated by geophysics, oceanographics, risk management, and foreign affairs institutions of the 4 countries of the Southeast Pacific, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and Chile. This group was created 10 years ago with the support of ECHO and UN agencies, and today it continues to operate under the Permanent Commission of the Southern Pacific. In the process of dissemination and promotion of good practices amongst national risk management systems, sectors, and regional institutions, as well as at community level, UNDRR has been our natural and fundamental ally as the main advocate for DRR in the region. For example, with your support and your engagement, the Safe Hospitals and Safe Schools initiatives have become public priorities built from elements which were developed at local level by ECHO partners. In other words, you have been a great, as the title of the session was, a great catalyst and a great magnifier for these initiatives. Today, thousands of schools and hospitals in the continent are prepared to face hazards, thanks among others to our partnership. Overall, the partnership with UNDRR is amongst one of the most successful in the region, with many initiatives taken forwards. Through it, we have discovered opportunities, new links through common thematic areas. And this partnership, which started, pretty technical, pretty, low-key and down-to-earth, this has developed into a strategic partnership. So let me now focus on some of the key main achievements of this partnership. Number one, generating action. This decade has allowed disaster risk reduction and particularly disaster preparedness to become a priority of the humanitarian agenda for us, ECHO, for other donors, promoting risk information generation, improving governance, and advocating for humanitarian and development nexus by UNDRR, as well as other partners at local and community level. A good example is the Caribbean Safe School Initiative that has a strong engagement of 19 ministers of education and partners. Number two, weaving of experience and expertise. UNDRR and ECHO work in the same field, each in our own role and enriched by the work of the other. UNDRR has helped shape ECHO's roadmap towards the Sendai Framework implementation model, while ECHO partners implement on-the-ground activities, which is equally important for policy development. Third, stimulate good practices. This decade has allowed ECHO, together with UNDRR and other partners, to foster actions at local and community level, inspire other donors and institutions to use this example of engagement and guidance as a model to replicate. Thanks to a DPECO regional meeting in South America organized by UNDRR, an agreement between the countries of the Andean Community of Nations allowed to facilitate, for instance, custom clearance of humanitarian items in case of emergency. And for those who do immediate response, we all know that one of the logistic bottlenecks is customs clearance in many cases. So that was something that could be prepared in advance. Number four, collective creation. You mentioned it, there are 34 country documents. They have been standardized, updated, digitalized, and in many cases completely elaborated at national and regional level, covering up to 25 countries. This was a very large, participatory and inclusive effort that allowed bringing together the main actors on disaster risk management from different countries to reflect on challenges, achievements, lessons learned of one, best practices of the other. To support this process, a community of experts worked together to create national guidelines for these country documents. The country documents on DRR have become a national reference for policy design and decision-making for interventions on DRR, as well as they provide guidance in the planning and coordination with cooperation entities which strive to support countries on the way towards a more resilient and protected society. And as I was saying earlier, when you become resilient and protected to cope with earthquakes, that also helps you be resilient and protected to cope with other challenges and other hazards. Number five, bridging the gap. Through 14 regional and national workshops organized, the relationship between ECHO partners and national authorities has been strengthened for better coordination, learning, sharing, dissemination, and institutionalization of disaster preparedness good practices, and also to promote this replicability and sustainable use over time. Many initiatives were launched inspired by the conversations that were held in those workshops. For instance, as one example is the exchange between resilient cities, Sao Paulo and Guayaquil, Asunción and La Paz, and so on. So it has been a space of, I would say, of creativity, which then the partnership has allowed to harness. And then last, the sixth achievement or success I would like to mention is knowledge brokering. One of the main activities sustained over the years has been the exchange of information by making information on different initiatives available to all the interested stakeholders. The alliance between ECHO and UNDRR allowed setting this website that Raul was referring to earlier on to consolidate and facilitate access to information as well as to promote the exchange of tools and knowledge between partners. The DPECO LAC web portal has currently more than 1,000 entries. DPECO LAC provides a critical space for the dissemination of tools, policies, and guidance, and did that already at a time when web portals were still something novel and scarce. This space has promoted relevant information for partners funded by ECHO in Latin America and the Caribbean during the last 20 years, paving its way as the most visited regional disaster preparedness webpage in the Spanish language. To sum up, through our coordination efforts to this joint establishment of priorities, knowledge sharing, and concrete implementation of actions, the ECHO UNDRR partnership has increased the scale up, the replicability, and the institutionalization of the disaster preparedness efforts at multiple levels. It has had a meaningful impact on the coping capacities of communities and of countries, and in saving lives and livelihood of people in lack at the moment when the disaster strikes. At global level, disaster preparedness needs to be widely integrated in all programs, not only the ones dealing with humanitarian aid, but also those which aim at mitigating the impact of climate change, protecting natural resources, biodiversity, and many more. And that's why we have been working closely with our colleagues in the European Commission's Department for International Partnerships to also integrate that dimension in the development cooperation programs that they are implementing. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Andrea. I think now it's the time to switch to the other side of the continent and ocean. Alvaro, I'm handing over to you, please.
Thank you, Stephanie. Then we are going to start the panel, the discussion, a bit to reflect on these 10 years of partnerships. As it has been mentioned by Raul and by Andrea, this partnership does not include only UNDRR and ECHO. This includes many kind of partners that have been contributed in the region for disaster preparedness and disaster risk reduction. This is the example of not only implementing partners, but also municipalities, national institutions, sectors, national systems of risk management, and also regional institutions that have been in the Caribbean, in South America, and in Central America participating in this. And in this panel, we have the lack of having the different representatives of different levels and different kind of partnerships, so that we can have a more complete picture of what these 10 years have meant for the disaster risk reduction in the region. So just to explain the way of working, I will present the panelists first. There will be some responses to a question that will be asked, and after that there will be an opportunity for each panelist to give final remarks with 30 seconds, and after that we will have a session on question and answers. The question and answers, obviously, for the people in the room will be managed by Stephanie, and with the traditional system of raising the hand. And in the case of online questions, please, I ask the participants who are interested to ask a question to write it in the question and answers sector of the WebEx, and then they will be transmitted to the panelists or to Andrea and Raul, that could also be asked for questions. Okay, so we will start by Cristian Torres. Cristian Torres, hello, good morning. How are you? This is fine. Cristian is the Director General of the National System for Disaster Risk Management in Ecuador. And we know each other, as it has been, as it is the case of all the panelists. It's a pleasure to have him here, because he has been involved not only in his current position, but also in his previous positions, because in Ecuador we've had different experiences with DPECO, and after that with the national system, the previous national secretary of disaster risk reduction, etc. Christian, I would ask you that just taking into consideration your experience, how would you evaluate the impact of this disaster preparedness? How this disaster preparedness program has contributed to to progress, to achieve a certain progress in the Hyogo Framework of Action or in the Sendai Framework of Action in Ecuador. Thank you. Christian, you have
Thank
5
you,
minutes.
Alvaro. First of all, please receive a cordial and attentive greeting. DG ECHO and UNDRR authorities, experts, technicians, friends that I have met in this road to resilience and the public attending to this event, from the National Risk and Emergency Management Service from Ecuador, especially from our President of Ecuador, His Excellency Mr. Guillermo Lasso. To put in context the topic that brings us together, I would like to begin by intervention talking about the geographic reality of our country, which makes us a unique country that is exposed to multiple threats and natural and anthropic origin, which, added to vulnerabilities of developing countries, can cause the occurrence of disasters, as we told at the beginning. According to data generated by our institution in 2020, Ecuador suffered 2,268 floods in the period of 2014 to 2020, affecting 263,000 people. In fact, in the last 35 years, floods and rains have become the most frequent natural risk at the national level, with a rate of 44%, followed by forest fires, landslides, tidal waves, earthquakes, and droughts. The provinces most affected by the rainy seasons are Guayas, Manabí, and Esmeraldas, and the number of productive hectares affected in the period of 2010 and 2020 was 86,590 on the coast. Despite of the COVID-19 pandemic and the impact of the global crisis, Ecuador continues to work in strengthening its disaster preparedness process in accordance with the priorities of the Sendai Framework. In relation to the priority number 1 of the Sendai Framework, Ecuador has been working on the articulation with actors of the Decentralized National Risk Management System for the identification, analysis, characterization, evaluation, and monitoring of risk and their possible effects on the national territory, to provide public and private institutions and the general population with reliable and user-friendly cartographic information. This will let them know the risk and promote actions for the remediation and recovery of different areas of the country. Also, we have strategic alliances with academia and technical scientific institutes to promote, coordinate, execute, and promote scientific research processes focused on risk knowledge. This input allows us to develop several tools as geoportals and improve the process to build and operate our early warning system. With respect to priorities 2 and 3 of the Sendai Framework, I emphasize that risk management in the country has been structured under the modality of a national system formed by the risk management units of the public and private sectors, which operates in decentralized and subsidiary manner. The responsibility of the state and local governments for risk management has made possible to develop national, sectoral, and local public policies to the objective of managing risk with a multi-sectoral and multi-level approach. These public policies have been implemented through national development plans, sectoral agendas, and institutional strategic plans at the national level, while at the local level through development and land management plans, in addition to other planning instruments that are used at the territories. Since 2021, our institution has been implementing a tool for the progressive advancement of local risk management governance through advisory group work and support to local governments, with a view to strengthening the institutional framework to incorporate risk management into the process and services. Regarding investment in disaster risk reduction for resilience, only in the period of 2018 and 2021, the state has executed around $500 million in investment spending. On the other hand, through financial programs with reimbursable and non-reimbursable funds for risk prevention and mitigation projects in local governments, the development bank of Ecuador between 2009 and 2011 financed trade for 155 million, and we are projecting to reopen this product for local governments in this year for about $300 million until 2025. In relation to priority 4 of the Sendai Framework, we have been carrying out response preparedness action and attending to emergencies that have arisen, based on interinstitutional coordination, assuming the respecting institutional competencies, promoting joint actions and respond to emergency, disaster, and catastrophes, situations that demand collective actions in national and international efforts. With the experience of the last few years, we have provided feedback on our procedures and strengthened our institutional capacities for decision-making in order to ensure that entire decentralized national risk management system is preventive, integrative, flexible, with open communication channels, and based on the definition of responsibilities and the institutionalization of risk management through the structure of the state. Among the main milestones of our institution in disaster preparedness, I mentioned the development of tools aligned to response preparedness and the implementation and evaluation in drills. For example, in 2016, we updated the Emergency Operation Committee Manual and the development of the guide for the implementation of the National User Teams accreditation process. And also in 2018, we developed and updated the National Disaster Response Plan, the practical guide for the implementation of simulation drills and other documents. In 2019, we developed and issued the protocol for activation of EVIN, that means evaluation teams, and the National Operations Protocol for search and rescue teams in collapsed structures. In 2022, we issued the general guidelines for the organization and operation of volunteer firefighters in the country, the manual for preparation of the tsunami evacuation plan, and the guide for the accreditation and reinforcement brigades in forest fires that we call BRIEF. It is important to highlight that since 2017, an average of 18 annual exercises have been executed at the territorial level, where hypothetical scenarios of emergencies and disasters are established to test procedures, strengthen the capacity of actors, and the decision-making of the authorities in the system, determining critical points and providing feedback to the process according to the evaluation of the exercise. Our institution works on the construction of public policy and promotes the strengthening of process of preparedness and response through the accreditation processes of the specialized first response team. We currently have 9 user teams in the country, which are in constant re-accreditation process. At the present, the country has 7 level B brigades and 8 level A brigades. Finally, with respect to the temporary shelters, in order to increase preparedness for disaster response and attention in Ecuador, in the last decade, there have been important advances in the management of temporary shelters related to the issues of public policy, and the subject and the identification and qualification of the spaces that can function as temporary shelters and not using schools, as well as the automation of processes that allow for continuous improvement and optimization of resources in this area. We still have a long way to go toward resilience, especially in climate change issues and increasingly incorporating technology and innovation in our process. Without any doubt, continued cooperation among Latin American countries and ongoing cooperation with DG ECHO and UNDRR will continue to be valuable on this path. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christian. I will give the floor now to Ronald Jackson, that is also a key person in the region that most of us know already, because he has been in almost, I think I've seen you in all the DPECO meetings in the Caribbean since I remember, because we have to see that Ronald Jackson, that is now the head of the Disaster Risk Reduction and Recovery for Building Resilience Team. This is a good title, because this is also a message, a part of a title. He has been the executive director of SEDIMA, that is the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Coordination Agency, who has been, by the way, working closely with UNDRR and with ECHO also. So for us, Ronald Jackson is a key person in this celebration, because he is now working with one of our main partners in in this partnership, and also he was the head of one of the main regional agencies in the region. So Ronald, thank you, welcome, good morning, good afternoon for you probably. I would just, with you, we can tackle the issue of coordination and knowledge management. What are the main achievements that you identify in terms of coordination, better coordination of DRR stakeholders and knowledge management supported with this decade of partnerships? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alvaro. And let me start first by expressing thanks to yourself, the ECHO team, and UNDRR colleagues for the opportunity to join in this celebration of partnership. And let me quickly acknowledge the excellencies in the audience, head of the UNDP office, colleagues online, colleague panelists. Certainly a pleasure to join you. I feel privileged to have been certainly at the forefront of this partnership. Both in my role at the national level, I also headed the National Disaster Management Agency in Jamaica, and it is as far back as then. So we note that the relationship between ECHO, UNISDR, which you mentioned, but also UNDP, can be traced back even longer than a decade. In fact, since 2004. UNDP has implemented several ECHO-funded projects in disaster preparedness, and as I said before, I've had the pleasure of being, engaged in those in my role as a national actor, and then later on, certainly, if we're talking about coordination, in my role as head of SEDIMA, where we've worked with ECHO and our UN partners to coordinate sort of a multi-country approach to some of these initiatives. Since 2011, UNDP and DG ECHO have joined forces in 43 countries, and ECHO financially supported actions in these areas in the LAC region, mostly for disaster preparedness, and in partnership with UNDRR on 14 particular proposals, as you saw in the video. Last year alone, we signed projects in Bolivia, Colombia, Ecuador, and Trinidad and Tobago. At the regional level, UNDP and ECHO have joined efforts on knowledge management oriented to compile good practices in disaster preparedness through initiatives carried out by a diverse range of stakeholders. These sound practices have been widely shared and disseminated through the South-South cooperation initiatives, which is also what I think to be a very, very key feature of the knowledge management approach, and a key feature in this partnership initiative. In the Andean region, Central America and the Caribbean have produced several knowledge products while enhancing national and local capacities for public officials, non-governmental organizations, and civil society organizations. These have helped to improve the interaction among many of the implementing stakeholders as well. And a good example of the South-South cooperation initiative that I mentioned in the Caribbean between 2017 and 2020 was where UNDP facilitated the government of Cuba's support to 5 other countries, Antigua and Barbuda, Dominican Republic, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and St. Lucia, to improve their respective early warning systems. At the national level, UNDP country offices have also carried out a wide range of disaster preparedness interventions, such as urban risk management, focusing on preparedness, of course, and this is in Honduras, Bolivia, and Peru. Early warning systems in Trinidad, Ecuador, and Bolivia, and information management and contingency planning at the subnational level. In all countries, UNDP has focused on enhancing governance capacities for better coordination in disaster preparedness and response. Multi-sector and multi-stakeholders and multi-level coordination platforms have been established to make government interventions even more effective. The relationship with the private sector has also been encouraged in the region, getting them increasingly involved in emergency management networks, both amongst themselves, but also within the context of the regional systems. To make disaster preparedness more integrated and comprehensive, UNDP has implemented a joint initiative with ECHO partners in Peru, developing disaster preparedness initiatives, hand in hand with other UN agencies such as World Food Programme, UNFPA, OCHA, and PAHO. In Ecuador and Bolivia, we've seen strong links that have been developed with the international and local NGOs, improving the localization of disaster preparedness tools at community level, whilst UNDP focus on setting the institutional basis for the sustainability of these approaches. The value of the UNDP partnership with ECHO is not measured for us simply in the amount of resource mobilized, but in the strategic positioning of UNDP as a bridge between humanitarian development and peace actors. UNDP is one of the only development actors that is partnering with ECHO to tackle issues related to disaster preparedness, early recovery coordination and programming, risk analysis, and public and private sector partnership. Each year, ECHO supports a few projects that are strategic to position UNDP within the humanitarian space and link humanitarian intervention with development programming. Our new guidance on disaster preparedness, which foresees increased collaboration across the HDP nexus, was also produced through this joint partnership. UNDP, with involvement of the Disaster Risk Reduction, Recovery and Resilience Building team, which I lead, and other UN agencies, contributed to the consultation and welcomed the new approach. Example, the links to global DRR agendas, the importance of risk assessment and risk-informed approaches, conflict sensitivity and community-based approaches, localization of aid, and strengthening national and local systems. UNDP has focused in identifying means and ways to provide long-term sustainability to these interventions by scaling up the local level initiatives and integrating them into larger disaster risk governance efforts, including issues such as protection, migration, and citizen security initiatives and their relationships with other disaster preparedness actors. We certainly thank ECHO for the relationship and the partnership, and we thank all the other UN agencies who have worked with us in coordination to deliver on these very important initiatives to advance a better risk reduction agenda at the regional and national level. Thank you.
Thank you, Ronald. I would just underline your sentence that the partnership is not only measured by the resources provided, and I think this is very much true in this case, in these partnerships that we are just talking about today. For this decade of partnerships, it has been fundamental to have the implementing partners of these ECHO projects, because during the last 10 years, the disaster preparedness initiatives just funded by ECHO in the region have been implemented by 70 different implementing partners, including UN agencies, including NGOs, and including also the Red Cross movement. And when we talk about the achievements at local level, one of the main partners have been CARE in the whole region, CARE International. And we have with us today Rafael Amar, that is the LAC Regional Humanitarian Coordinator, that is with us. Good morning, Rafael. How are you?
Good morning, everybody, and good afternoon for those in Europe. Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me here. Thanks a lot to UNDRR, to ECHO for inviting me. I had the chance throughout my career to be involved in many projects at community level, either with CARE or other organizations. And I have seen throughout the years the impact and the difference, such projects can bring to the communities, but also to the countries at a larger scale. I think one of the major impact of all the programs that we've been developing over the years has been to be replacing the community, people, grassroots organizations at the center of the practice of disaster preparedness. Moving communities from being a spectator to being a protagonist of the design of their own resilience and the design of response to disasters. I think this has led to a very high level of dedication of communities themselves, of grassroots organization. And this, coupled with innovation, support of implementation partners, has led to a number of successful initiatives that were named around here, from setting up successful early warning systems to developing successful school preparedness programs, or anticipating risks that were not considered at a certain stage in the countries. I think one of the key aspects of community-based intervention in the past few years has been the strengthening of the national civil protection mechanisms by precisely linking communities with NDMOs, with their national disaster management structure. I think this has been key, not only generating this link between the NDMOs, local organizations, people in the communities, but also placing people at the center of this disaster response mechanism has been, to me, one of the greatest success that we can see all around the region. And LAC is very vast. It's very rich in its diversity. So we could analyze as much context as there are people around the region. But I think this trend of precisely linking and strengthening national civil protection mechanisms with communities has been, to me, one of the greatest success. That communities have played a protagonistic role, supported by implemented partners, and this has led also to a dissemination of the good practices across the region. And I've seen it and we've been given examples here by panel members. We've been able to pick up good practices from countries and be able to scale it up or implement it in other part of the region. I mean, how this is making a difference today, I think communities today are playing an active and strong role in the design of their own resilience framework, leading to increased resilience, leading to increased response capacities. And ultimately, this saves lives. And it was mentioned before, this increased local capacity was key to the response during the COVID-19 pandemic, when most of the regional or even global response mechanisms were stuck with the effects of the pandemic. The local response became the key to an effective response, for instance, to the effect of hurricanes Eta, Iota, and Honduras, and this was mentioned before. I think if we look ahead now, community-based intervention is obviously the key to an effective response to the various challenges that today the region and the world is facing. If we look at climate change, adaptation, if we look at man-made issues, if we look at migration issues affecting the broader region, I think our communities in Latin America and the Caribbean are the key element which will enable efficient response and all around the region. Over. Thank you.
Thank you, Rafael. I keep you. Thank you very much, Rafael. Very important, exactly as you say. One of the key aspects has been to put people at the center of the program. I think that this is fundamental. During the first projects that were funded, were of partnership between UNDRR and ECHO, there was a figure that was fundamental at that moment. That was the liaison officers. That were people who were integrated in these projects and were based in the national systems of disaster risk management. And this was fundamental because this was a way of linking much better, which is the offer provided by the partners and by ECHO and the demand that existed in the national systems of disaster risk management. And this was fundamental. Why I'm telling this is because our next participant, our next panelist, Claudia Herrera, was one of these persons. And so she knows very well what we are talking about when we are talking about this UNDRR and ECHO partnerships. Hello, Claudia. Good morning. How are you? We cannot hear you, but...
I'm here. Thank you.
I have the question for you would be just in the light of all your experience of this in this partnership. What would be the main lessons learned that you would just take and harvest for us to enlighten the future of this partnership and for UNDRR in general in the region? Thank you.
Good afternoon to my fellow panelists and to all the participants of this important event. As Executive Secretary of the Coordination Center for Disaster Prevention in Central America and the Dominican Republic, it's an honor and a privilege to share with you today. The main challenge in this intervention is to be able to talk well because I am with COVID and with some difficulties to talk, but I cannot miss this very important opportunity to highlight what ECHO's financial and technical contribution has meant in our region in the last 10 years. I have had the opportunity to live this experience from different areas where I have been involved, working with civil society, governments, United Nations, directly with communities, and now in an intergovernmental entity. I have to highlight the significant contributions in disaster risk reduction based on the experience of the DG ECHO and the PECO project of this last decade in compliance with their humanitarian mandate to save and preserve lives and contribute to increase the resilience of peoples and communities. This compliance that we share fully in Central America at Preparedness. From my experience in the countries in these years of institutional work, I have been able to be part of the building capacity of multiple projects of the PECO and how they promote the improvement of resilience and disaster risk reduction in our region through strategic partners and with the accompaniment of UNDRR. Preparedness coordinates the comprehensive disaster risk management and civil protection system in the region related to disaster prevention, mitigation, response, impact, and also recovery action. Through this ECHO and UNDRR support, as Raul mentioned before, we have been made available to the entire region the Central America Policy for Comprehensive Disaster Risk Management, PSEGIR, that was harmonized with the Sendai Framework as the maximum instrument of regional orientation in the matter, offering greater added value to the process that currently are developed in the countries and strengthening the governance and the disaster risk reduction agenda in the countries and in the region. For Preparedness, the preparation, continuous updates, and the implementation and evaluation of compliance with regional policy must serve as a foundation, support, and orientation for orderly, coordinated, and intersectoral actions. Also, I want to highlight that we insert as an annex to the Sendai Monitor platform an area to report the progress of our regional plan, being the first region in the world with this technological advance, providing evidence based on making a difference as part of the ECHO project. Overlooking some successful projects that have been contributed to achieving national objectives in disaster risk reduction, such as the institutionalization of disaster preparedness methodologies, the protection of vulnerable groups in preparation and response, the update of regional, national, and local disaster risk reduction strategies and plans as the region coordination mechanisms of mutual assistance between our countries. Also, the construction of resilient communities, the strengthening of institutional capacities for the preparation of an effective response for disasters and crises at national and regional level. These projects have been essential in building territorial capacities, providing useful lessons to deal with the increasingly strong impacts of disaster, having in mind that the Central America region, in addition to the exposure to climatological factors exacerbated by climate change and geological factors derived from our geographical positions in the Pacific Ring of Fire, plus the convergence of political, social, and economical drivers of risk, have placed the region in a condition prone to severe disasters, a situation that in the last years, with the appearance of COVID-19, has generated multi-threat scenarios, complex, to which we were not ready to face, forcing us to take a more holistic and systemic view to understand and manage risk. Just to mention one example, I remember how we developed indicators to measure the promotion of women's leadership in the decision-making at a community level. And I have to say, with such pride that I have personally overcome this, being the first woman in Central America as head of an intergovernmental entity for disaster risk management. From our perspective, we are together with ECHO and UNDRR consolidating and promoting strategic actions to reduce vulnerability and continue to strengthen capacity in exposed populations, placing the human being at the center of our intervention, as indicated by the objectives of sustainable development and in our Central American policy that states leave no one behind. Thanks to the solid foundations that were built with the DG ECHO projects that show us the path to address mitigation factor and systemic risk analysis in all of our actions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Claudia. Thank you, Claudia. I think that Preparedness has been a fundamental partner for all the actions in the region, and you know it well as executive director of that is your position now. So we are going to pass now to the question and answers part. So I would pass the floor to Stephanie for starting by the people that is in present there. Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you, Alvaro, and thank you for all the panelists today. I think it was very interesting to listen to you, and I'm going to look a little bit here in the round and trying to see who will be ready to ask, because I'm not sure how many of you are aware about all the dynamics. Sometimes ambassadors are a bit, might not aware about all of this. And I wanted to hear from you, and maybe you have questions, or maybe you want to leave some impressions on what you have heard today. Is anyone wanted to speak? I want to give some impression. Can I pick on you? Or are you shying shyly away? Or shall we first ask the online audience? Who would like to say some words? No? All shy? Alvaro, do you have some questions received from the online audience?
We have received just one.
No, please go ahead.
Okay. So this question is saying, I would love to hear from panelists to what extent or in what ways has cash and voucher assistance been incorporated into this preparedness work? Can you give any examples, or perhaps where the opportunities are to incorporate for these modalities? Thanks. Is the regional representative for Americas of the Catalysing network who is asking. I would say that probably Rafael from Kirk could just have some lights on this aspect, because I know that Karen is working on this aspect.
It's true that if we reflect on the last 10 years, which is pretty much the purpose of this call, cash and voucher intervention has taken a greater and greater role in response to disaster. But what maybe we have lacked, and at least as I can see from different perspectives sometimes, was to incorporate cash and voucher preparedness and factor it into our projects to enhance preparedness in the region. We have been pretty good at rolling out cash and voucher programs from the onset of a disaster, but I do think that there's still room to increase preparedness for cash and voucher intervention in many of the setups. We see countries that are leaders in LAC today in cash and voucher intervention. Other countries are still looking to develop their capacities. And so I think this is definitively a realm where we can look for cross-learning opportunities and opportunities to further enhance capacities in our actions. Over.
Thank you, Rafael. I don't know if any other of the panelists has Ronald, you raise your hand.
Yes, certainly within our early recovery work stream, we have been incorporating more and more approaches to cash. But I think as UNDP itself looks at strengthening, more of its anticipatory work, we are looking now at, this area of preparedness, bridging the new tools emerging around foresight, horizon scanning, etc., to do better at our early warning and early action measures. And so, the feature around how we use cash may in our future generation of programming, see some efforts prior to the early recovery phases.
Thank you, Ronald. In this sense, I think that this is important to underline also that one of the priorities of the program and developed in the last years has been also the link with social protection systems. And in this sense, I think that it has been a fundamental tool, yes, to link. And in some cases, for example, in some Caribbean countries or in Peru, for example, the integration of this social protection to develop shock responsive systems, it has been fundamental, and I think that is a fundamental tool in this sense. We have another question that I would say that it would be more addressed to Andrea and Raul, because they are asking about about the future of the cooperation between UNDRR and ECHO in the region. How do they see the disaster preparedness programming in the future?
Can we have the microphone, please? Thank you. Is it on? Okay. Who would like to start?
Thank you, Andrew. I think that from the perspective of UNDRR, of course, we have an overarching goal which is aligned to what countries have already adopted, which is the Sendai Framework. The Sendai Framework has 9 years to become to its target in 2030. It has specific targets to achieve in terms of mortality, in terms of how we are going to reduce economic impacts of disasters. The reality of what we are seeing is that what we need to do is more integrated work in different contexts. We have started this work with ECHO, addressing this aspect that is also being called as an important part of this of achieving this target, is how we start seeding the actions in the humanitarian context to start the development processes, the humanitarian nexus basically. And this is something that we need to explore further. Disasters unlikely still happen in the region, but I think that we have the elements to start working, linking all these development processes since the very beginning. Triple nexus is one of them. The region is facing different new hazards, as Andrea mentioned. This is climate-related displacements, issues in relation to human-induced hazards now happening. So how we're going to address this, and this is probably one of the elements or more to start building this agenda of cooperation for the future, and of course to help in the achievement of a Sendai Framework.
Thanks, Raul. ECHO defines often itself as a short-term instrument because we work on an annual basis. But when you look at this retrospective on 10 years of partnership, 25 years of, or 30 years of ECHO programs in LAC, you see that actually we're not that short-term. We're actually quite long-term, and I would say that our partnership with UNDRR, but also our partnership with the whole community around this program is a commitment that has been there for a very long time, and it's a commitment that remains. The fact that we have more and more, let's say, dramatic and devastating natural disasters is a reason also to continue. And another reason to continue is the fact that we see the results of what we have done together. You mentioned the term nexus. We have integrated disaster risk reduction into humanitarian response. We have integrated the preparedness looking at the humanitarian response. But when we hear questions such as the one on cash and vouchers, for instance, we see that elements linked to social inequalities, elements linked to social protection systems that need to be put in place, which are development investments, are necessary in order to make that agenda progress further. So I would say yes, there are years of healthy cooperation ahead of us, both between ECHO and UNDRR, both between the EU and the region. And I was referring to civil protection at the beginning of my intervention. I think we would also like to see an institutional relationship existing. We have built that relationship with Preparedness. It's very comforting to see the evolution that an organization like Preparedness has had over the years, and we would like to see that also happening in other parts of the continent, and creating those links also with the other parts and the other regions in the continent.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea and Raul. We don't have more questions, at least in the virtual world. I don't know if in the room you have any question remaining there. If it is not the case, I will give the floor to Saskia to proceed with the poll. Thank you, Saskia.
Yes, over to you.
Thank you very much, Alvaro. We would go now to our engagement section. I would like to invite you all to join at slido.com from your mobile phone, as Steffi said at the beginning. There is the code, which is 8720730. For the audience online, you can also scan the QR code. And there is one question. In one word, how has disaster preparedness made a difference in Latin America and the Caribbean? With this one word, we will be building a word cloud to see what is the main output from all that has been shared today in one word. We can give a few seconds. We already have some words coming up. Activation, anticipation, anticipatory action has come out a lot this afternoon. Resilience, life-saving, collaboration, community-based, scaling up. I think we have seen a lot of experiences of scaling up. Localization, working at local level with partners, through partners. And achievements, as well as inclusion. So thank you very much. The word cloud will keep growing. We will also post it on social media after the event. So Steffi, the floor is back to you. Thank you.
Very much, Saskia. I feel like, in this afternoon interaction, we're building really partnerships across the ocean. It feels so close and so connected. And it is now my great pleasure to introduce to you when we talk about partnership, and we're talking about not just prevention, but also, not just about preparedness, but we're moving to the prevention and development side. And it's my great honor to introduce to you Ms. Miriam Farran, who's the Deputy Director General from the European Commission's Department of International Partnership. And we're so pleased to have you here. I know you were rushing from meetings to meetings through a big traffic jam and strike. So thank you so much for taking this effort, please.
Thank you very much for your kind words, and good afternoon, good morning, or early afternoon to all. I'm very happy to be with you today. I would like to thank the host. I'm really sorry not to have been able to attend the full session, but be reassured, I still listen to it. So I was kind of connected digitally, part of the session, so I could even grasp some of the elements which I really find extremely interesting and important. I would like to thank the host. I saw Camilla was there earlier on in the session when I started connecting. I don't see her, but I really want to thank Camilla. I would like to thank you, Raul, and my dear friend Andrea for inviting me for this closing session. And indeed, as you mentioned, I think we really have all a complementary role, and as part of the European Commission, we work hand in hand with Andrea and all the team, DG ECHO, DG International Partnership. And we do really consider that the Commission is there to support the region as a whole in all its components. So I was really happy that I heard you mentioning the nexus. I will come back to it later on. But first, I'm extremely happy to be here with you today. I think it's really an important event to celebrate 10 years of very strong partnership. I have to admit I was quite struck when I started digging into the issue and realizing that over the last basically 20 years, 25% of the disasters that occurred all around the world have been hitting the region of Latin America and the Caribbean. And this makes it all the more important to have a concerted answer, not only to immediate action after such disaster happen, but also as prevention and long-term partnership to build resilience in a longer-term approach. And this is where I think our cooperation within the European Commission on the one hand and within the European Union, but even more on a multilateral setting is so important. And this is why I'm so happy to be here, invited by the UN Brussels representation and for this event celebrating 10 years of cooperation with the UN Regional Office for the Americas and the Caribbean disaster risk reduction, because I genuinely believe there is a very strong multilateral component in the answer we can provide to those challenges. So, if we look, I know you have been talking a lot about specific activities and in particular the projects you have been implementing together between UNDRR, I'm very bad with acronyms, sorry, UNDRR and the European Commission, but we also have a long-standing partnership in terms of building this nexus, and in particular this specific component, humanitarian development angle of the triple nexus. And this is where I think we can commonly contribute and improve and continue improving the impact we're having by having a long-term perspective. And this is what in INPA, INPA is International Partnership Directorate General, we are working on a daily basis to take it together with our colleagues, take it from the immediate humanitarian assistance experience to build a help on the one side on prevention and on adaptation. And we have been, I think, developing this partnership all along the celebration of the years you have been working together, and we have quite a good success story to tell in terms of record, and this is really an angle we're putting forward in our future activities for the next years to come. It's very much part of our own activities, and this I would say in two senses. First, we are having a lot of ongoing projects that we aim to bring to fruition all over the region, and there I can give you a few examples. I know you have been discussing many of such examples all over this afternoon, but still, our objective when we work in cooperation with ECHO is really to first improve the prevention capacity and then work with our partner countries to improve the resilience and response capacity. And this we do in all countries in the region at each and every level, be it overall in the overall regions, sub-regions, or national level. And if I want to give you a few examples of what has been developed or is in the process of being developed, we are working very strongly to improve. We already put forward and we have an operating Copernicus data center in Panama, on which we are with which we are working and which capabilities we aim at developing with additional financial support. And this is a clear sign on how we can really use the new digital capacities and have a real nexus even beyond what we say of the first branch of humanitarian development assistance. We go much further. We really use all capacities to develop with the newest technology an added value to improve the prevention and mitigation side of disaster prevention and management. And with this imagery that will come out from this Copernicus Center, we really aim of strengthening the capacity of the whole region in both preventing potential disasters and then building long-term resilient system to adapt to forecasted disasters. We also have been working together with the World Bank in supporting the Caribbean Catastrophe Risk Insurance Facility. So this is a different type of assistance. This is much more direct financial assistance, where we work in developing a scheme that allows very rapid transfer of financial assistance just after a disaster occurred, and it's a scheme which is ongoing and on which we can see is already providing some very strong benefits. We are also working, and this is something I would say that is more within our own DNA, on institutional capacity building. So we are working with a lot of institutions, be they national or regional, and providing either financial assistance or technical expertise so as to develop the own capacity in terms of prevention and devising long-term strategies to address disasters. So one example of that is in the Caribbean again, is the support we are providing to the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, with whom we have an ongoing program to support the daily work and capability of the agency. We are also, I would say, maybe in a wider context, we have been under the previous and now from 2021 to 27 in our programming activities, we have been putting a very strong emphasis on the fight against climate change. This is the number one priority, if we can qualify them, because we have many, but still, even in this very contested geopolitical context where energy is top of the agenda, the fight against climate change is the number one priority of this Commission. This is translated within the European Union through the EU Green Deal, as we call it. This is exported in our relationship with our partner countries worldwide via a very strong financial support we are providing to fighting climate change. And this applies very strongly to our assistance to the Latin American and Caribbean region. And we have been supporting over time, and we will be supporting even more horizontal programs to fight climate change. So a few examples there is the Euroclimate program, which is very well known in Latin America and that we have the pleasure to extend to the Caribbean from this year onwards. And this program will in particular help the country develop their own nationally determined contributions in the framework of the COP. And all those activities, even though it's technical assistance supporting the administrations, all those activities really aim at putting forward systems that will limit the risks stemming from climate change and equip the country's administrations and operating bodies to be able to better prevent and adapt to the disasters that are stemming from climate change. And we have, I think this summer has been quite straightforward in this respect, and the past years we see the impact on a daily basis. So this is an important priority for us, and this is a priority that will be declined in many activities, in particular in the region. So looking at this Euroclimate program, or Euroclimate Plus, as we like to call it now, we already have identified 6 multi-country disaster risk reduction projects over the region. And of course, in the years to come, we aim at developing and intervening much more in this sense. In the same direction, we're also working on preservation of biotopes and biodiversity with an objective to, again, protect the natural landscapes that are kind of a barrier against disaster provoked by climate change. So in this, we are working in particular on the Amazon region, and we just adopted a program a few months ago to dedicate 35 million euros to an Amazon basin initiative focusing on forest monitoring, conservation and restoration. We have an equivalent project in Guyana and Suriname on protection of the mangrove for exactly the same reasons. And all those projects are comprehensive projects, and this is where I would see a clear link to development, where we work not only on preservation of biotopes and natural elements, but we do this having the full vision and integrating the economic relationship with the populations living there, and an element of protection, be it of the indigenous people in the Amazon, and working with the local communities also on the mangrove forest. So this kind of approach is really to try to work towards developing a sustainable development model that is on the one hand respectful of the biodiversity and ecological conditions, but also providing subsistence to the local population in a way that anchors them into the territories. So these are a few examples. So we work really hand in hand with DG ECHO, moving from immediate reactions or reshaping of projects when there is an immediate acute need after a disaster. But our objective is really to take it from there and build this kind of anchor that for us is the real deep meaning of what the humanitarian development nexus should be, and take it developing in particular with the governments or NGOs, but all actors in the countries, systems that allow better preventing such events, or at least better adapting when they occur. And last word, I'm sorry, I think I've been speaking a lot, but last word, when I say we, I usually mean we, the European Union. So I've been working a lot, talking a lot about DG INPA and DG ECHO, because I have Andrea in front and I watch her, so of course this is just natural. But we're really working all together as European institutions and in particular the European Commission, also with other departments, be it on climate change or environment or economic development, but we are also working with our member states. And when we want to provide long-term solutions, we are also working with our European financial institutions, in particular the European Bank for Investment, because we do genuinely believe that it's by presenting a united front, and now we have a very sexy logo for this united front. We call it Team Europe, El Equipo Europa. And with this Team Europe, we really want to make a difference, have a bigger impact, and of course, always in a multilateral context. And this is the reason why I'm very happy to be here in the UN House, because our cooperation with the UN institution in this respect is fundamental for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We have now reached the end of our gathering here. I really would like to thank from the bottom of the heart everyone who made the efforts to come to the building here, but I'm also aware that we had over 130 people online listening and actually staying till the very end. So thank you so much for this. I like the online panel. Thank you for coming here, even if you learned that you had to endure some additional difficulties. We hope you stay all well and healthy. This is the most important. And I think we'll continue working towards making the world a bit safer. And maybe one day our dreams will come true and there are no more disasters. So with this, I wish you a lovely day overseas, colleagues and gentlemen, and we stay a little bit here together and enjoy the rest of the evening. So thank you so much. Goodbye, and maybe in 10 years again, we celebrate even more. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Luminaria en las sombras que a tu boca se acercó, de tu voz brotaban ramas verdes, islas, fuente clara. Eres la flor del lirio de colores, mistura. Eres la flor que yo probé.